You wake up to a sound that doesn't belong to the wind. Somewhere beyond the darkness, branches snap beneath something heavy. You have no walls to hide behind, no locked door to keep danger out, and no flashlight to pierce the night. Your bed is a patch of ground. Your blanket is whatever the weather allows. Bare feet press against the cold earth. You strain to find the source of the noise. Then you notice two faint reflections staring back from the darkness. They aren't stars, they're eyes. For almost every human who ever lived before the rise of agriculture around 10,000 years ago, this wasn't imagination. It was life. Every sunset brought the possibility that something larger, faster, and far better equipped for killing was already watching. In that world, humans weren't the fearless hunters standing proudly at the top of the food chain. Instead, they occupied a far less enviable position. To many predators, they were simply another easy meal waiting to be taken. That reality leads to one question that's almost impossible to ignore. If our ancestors were relatively slow and lacked claws, fangs, thick fur, or natural armor, how did they survive long enough to become the planet's dominant species? How did an animal that appears so physically unimpressive outlast creatures that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of hunting? The answer wasn't hidden in a single invention or one miraculous leap in evolution. Instead, it emerged gradually over hundreds of thousands of years as countless generations solved one life or death problem after another. Every successful innovation, whether staying together in larger groups, mastering fire, crafting better tools, or sharing knowledge through language, became another layer of protection. On their own, none of these adaptations made humans unstoppable. But together, they transformed one of nature's most vulnerable primates into the only species capable of reshaping entire ecosystems. To understand how that transformation happened, we have to start at the beginning, long before fire, spears, or even the confidence to stand their ground. Before humans learned how to master the world around them, they first had to survive a world that seemed determined to kill them. At that point, surviving another day was already a victory. The reality was even harsher than most movies or documentaries suggest. It's easy to picture prehistoric humans as muscular hunters confidently marching across the savannah with spears in hand, ready to take on anything that crossed their path. But that image belongs to the very end of a much longer story. For most of human evolution, our ancestors possessed none of the advantages we instinctively associate with survival. They had no controlled fire, no carefully crafted weapons, no permanent shelters, and no reliable way to communicate complex strategies. Compared with the animals around them, they were astonishingly ordinary. Travel back more than 2 million years, and the landscape looked less like a world built for humans than one actively working against them. Vast grasslands stretched toward the horizon, broken by forests, rivers, and rocky outcrops that concealed danger at every turn. Every trip to drink from a river or gather food meant entering places where predators expected prey to appear. Waterholes, in particular, were deadly crossroads. Herbivores gathered there because they had no choice, and carnivores knew it. The simple act of satisfying thirst could become a fatal mistake. The predators themselves were unlike anything most of us will ever encounter. Saber-toothed cats waited in ambush with canine teeth long enough to puncture the necks of massive herbivores. Giant hyenas possessed jaws capable of crushing bones so dense that modern predators often leave them untouched. Enormous cave bears dominated forests and mountain valleys, while crocodiles patrolled rivers that early humans had to cross or drink from. Even the skies could pose a threat, as gigantic birds of prey were capable of attacking animals surprisingly close to the size of a person. Against opponents like these, the human body offered remarkably little protection. We couldn't outrun them. We couldn't overpower them. Even our own bodies offered almost no protection. Our skin tore easily, our bite was weak, and our fingernails were useless as weapons. Even our senses left us at a disadvantage. Many predators could detect movement in near darkness, identify scents from extraordinary distances, or hear sounds far beyond the limits of human perception. By comparison, our ancestors looked less like future rulers of the planet and more like vulnerable primates stranded in the wrong ecosystem. From an evolutionary perspective, humans were prey. Fossil evidence tells us that large carnivores occasionally hunted early members of our family tree, and marks left by ancient teeth on hominin bones reveal encounters that ended exactly as predators intended. In some archaeological sites, the remains of our ancestors have been discovered alongside the leftovers of other hunted animals, a sobering reminder that humans once occupied a very different place in the food web. Yet that picture raises an extraordinary puzzle. At first glance, the answer seems like it should be simple. They shouldn't have survived at all. If early humans were so poorly equipped for survival, why didn't they disappear like countless other species? What allowed this fragile primate to endure while so many larger, stronger, and seemingly superior animals eventually vanished? The answer begins not with sharper weapons or bigger brains, but with something far simpler. Long before humans learned to change the world, they learned to rely on one another. That decision to refuse to face the wilderness alone became the first turning point in our survival story. And that single change altered the odds more than our ancestors could possibly have realized. Living in groups may seem like an obvious strategy today, but for our ancestors, it became one of the most powerful survival tools evolution ever produced. A lone human on the prehistoric savanna stood little chance against a hungry predator. A group of 20 or 30 humans was a completely different challenge. They still weren't stronger than a lion or faster than a leopard, but survival isn't always decided by strength alone. Often it's decided by whether an attack is worth the risk. Modern studies of predators reveal something that surprises many people. Large carnivores are incredibly cautious. Although they look fearless, they survive only by avoiding unnecessary injuries. A broken tooth, a damaged leg, or even a deep cut can prevent an animal from hunting for weeks. For a predator that depends on catching prey to eat, even a minor injury can become a death sentence through starvation. Every attack is a calculation, weighing the potential reward against the possible cost. Fortunately for our ancestors, predators often reached the same conclusion. Humans didn't have to become stronger than predators. They only had to become more trouble than they were worth. Imagine a saber-toothed cat scanning a herd of grazing animals. Off to one side, it notices a single human bending down to collect roots. Easy prey, until it notices another group nearby. They aren't running. Instead, they're shouting, waving branches, throwing stones, and advancing together. Suddenly, the hunt doesn't look nearly as appealing. The cat may still be stronger than every individual in the group, but strength means little if it has to face attacks from several directions at once. Biologists call one part of this phenomenon the dilution effect. Simply put, when individuals remain together, the chance of any one member becoming the victim drops significantly. But humans pushed this idea much further than most animals ever could. They didn't merely gather in groups, they cooperated. Adults protected children. Younger members learned by watching experienced ones. Everyone reacted to danger as part of a coordinated response instead of as a collection of individuals. Our closest living relatives offer a glimpse of how ancient this behavior may be. Chimpanzees have been observed mobbing leopards, surrounding them while screaming, throwing branches, and charging together until the predator retreats. Early humans almost certainly expanded on this strategy. They discovered that confidence itself could become a weapon. A predator expecting panic instead encountered organized resistance. Over countless generations, natural selection reinforced this behavior. Groups that stayed together were more likely to survive, raise children, and pass their habits to the next generation. Those that scattered when danger appeared often vanished from the evolutionary story altogether. Cooperation wasn't simply a social preference, it became a biological advantage. But cooperation alone couldn't eliminate danger. Every sunset still brought a familiar problem that groups, no matter how united, struggle to solve. The next breakthrough would completely change humanity's relationship with the night. That next challenge arrived every single evening. Long before humans learned to keep a fire alive, night was the most dangerous part of the day. Darkness erased the one advantage our ancestors depended on most, the ability to see trouble coming. While humans struggled to make out shapes a few meters away, many predators were only beginning their hunting routine. Lions, leopards, hyenas, and countless smaller carnivores use the cover of darkness to stalk silently towards sleeping prey. For an animal that spends nearly a third of its life unconscious, this should have been an evolutionary disaster. The first solution wasn't to conquer the night, but to escape it. Our ancestors almost certainly sought safety above the ground whenever they could. Like modern chimpanzees, they likely climbed into trees to sleep, building temporary nests on sturdy branches beyond the reach of most predators. It wasn't a perfect defense. Leopards are exceptional climbers, and fossil evidence suggests that some early human relatives did fall victim to them. Even so, sleeping in the trees dramatically reduced the number of threats they had to face. Instead of worrying about every predator on the landscape, they only had to fear the few capable of following them upward. caves offered another possibility, but they came with a dangerous catch. From a human perspective, a cave seems like the ideal shelter: dry, sheltered from the wind, and easy to defend because it has only a few entrances. Unfortunately, large carnivores reached the same conclusion long before humans did. Cave bears, cave lions, and cave hyenas all used these spaces as dens. Moving into a cave sometimes meant trying to evict an occupant that outweighed you by several hundred kilograms. Archaeologists have even found evidence that humans and predators alternated using the same caves over thousands of years, as though they were unwilling neighbors taking turns occupying the same home. Everything changed when humans learned to control fire. For the first time, our ancestors weren't simply reacting to predators, they were actively changing the conditions under which predators hunted. Fire did far more than provide warmth. It introduced something almost every large predator instinctively respected: flame. Across the natural world, flames signal danger, an unpredictable force that cannot be bitten, outrun, or intimidated. A campfire pushed back the darkness, exposed approaching predators long before they reached camp, and surrounded sleeping humans with a barrier few carnivores willingly crossed. From that point forward, the night no longer belonged entirely to the hunters. Humanity had discovered a way to reshape its environment instead of merely enduring it, and that single breakthrough opened the door to something even more powerful. Once people could survive the night more consistently, they also had more opportunities to pass on what they had learned, and those lessons would prove just as valuable as fire itself. Fire protected the body, but its greatest gift may have been something less obvious. Surviving required more than warmth and safety. It required the ability to preserve knowledge. Every dangerous encounter carried a lesson: a hidden watering hole where crocodiles waited, a valley where lions hunted at dusk, or the warning call of birds that often meant a leopard was nearby. For most animals, that knowledge dies with the individual. When an experienced member of the group disappears, years of hard-earned survival experience disappear with it. That pattern didn't last forever. And once knowledge could survive the people who discovered it, every generation began life with an advantage the previous one had earned. As language became more sophisticated, our ancestors gained an extraordinary ability that no predator could match. They could describe things that weren't happening in the present. They could warn others about yesterday's danger, prepare for tomorrow's hunt, or explain why one path was safer than another. A child no longer had to survive a close encounter with a leopard to learn that leopards were deadly. Someone else could pass on that lesson long before the child ever stepped into the forest. From that moment on, survival worked differently. Instead of every generation starting from scratch, knowledge accumulated. One person's discovery became the entire group's advantage. Over hundreds of generations, those shared experiences grew into an invisible library of survival strategies, expanding far beyond what any single individual could learn in a lifetime. This collective memory also changed how humans understood the landscape itself. They began recognizing patterns that only became obvious when observations were shared across many people and many years. Certain rivers became dangerous during the dry season because predators gathered there. Some hills provided better visibility, allowing danger to be spotted long before it arrived. Campsites weren't chosen at random anymore. They reflected generations of careful observation, trial and error, and stories passed from one family to the next. Modern ecologists use the term landscape of fear to describe how prey animals navigate environments filled with predators. Deer, antelope, and countless other species constantly adjust their movements based on where danger is most likely to appear. Our ancestors did the same, but with one remarkable advantage. Instead of relying only on personal experience, they pooled information. Their mental maps became richer, more detailed, and increasingly accurate with every generation. This ability to build on the discoveries of those who came before created a form of evolution that worked far faster than biology alone. Bodies change over thousands of generations. Ideas can change in a single conversation. Every successful hunt, every failed attack, every broken tool became another lesson that didn't disappear with the people who learned it. Instead, each generation inherited those lessons and improved them just a little more. Gradually, those small improvements accumulated into technologies no single individual could have invented alone. Eventually, all of those shared lessons led to something entirely new: Knowledge was no longer enough on its own. It was time to turn those ideas into tools. Among them, one invention stood above almost all the others: the spear. That invisible library of knowledge eventually took physical form. The oldest known wooden spears, dating back roughly 400,000 years, reveal a surprising level of craftsmanship. They weren't crude sticks sharpened in haste. Instead, each spear was carefully balanced and shaped from selected wood to fly accurately through the air. Their makers may never have studied physics, but they understood it through experience. Generation after generation, they refined these weapons until they became extensions of the human body. What made the spear so revolutionary wasn't just its sharp point, it was the distance it created. Before projectile weapons, harming a large predator meant getting close enough for that predator to strike back. Against claws, massive jaws, and explosive speed, that was a losing proposition. A thrown spear rewrote the rules. Suddenly, humans could injure or drive away an attacker while remaining safely beyond its reach. One spear was dangerous. A volley of them was something entirely different. A coordinated group launching several from different directions presented a threat that many predators simply weren't prepared to face. Large carnivores are intelligent learners. They quickly associate painful experiences with future decisions. A lion that survives a painful encounter with armed humans doesn't need to be taught the lesson twice. The next time it sees a group carrying long wooden shafts, caution often outweighs hunger. Over time, humans ceased to resemble vulnerable prey and began to look like an unpredictable risk. Weapons changed the way predators viewed humans. But they weren't the only physical advantage our ancestors possessed. Yet, even with better weapons, humans possessed another advantage that rarely receives the attention it deserves. Our greatest physical strength wasn't speed or power, it was endurance. Compared with almost every large predator, humans are remarkably inefficient sprinters. A lion, wolf, or hyena can outrun us with ease over short distances. But those bursts of speed come at a tremendous cost. Their bodies generate heat rapidly, and cooling that heat becomes a serious limitation. Rather than relying on explosive speed, humans evolved a very different strategy. By sweating across nearly our entire bodies and moving efficiently on two legs, we can maintain a steady pace for hours in conditions that force many other mammals to stop and recover. This ability made persistence hunting possible, allowing our ancestors to pursue exhausted prey over extraordinary distances. It also revealed an important truth. Survival didn't always belong to the fastest animal. It often belonged to the one that simply refused to stop. Reliable hunting didn't just fill empty stomachs, it created stability. Larger groups could remain together longer. Children were more likely to survive, and experience accumulated within communities that no longer spent every waking moment avoiding starvation. Once survival became slightly less uncertain, humans finally had the freedom to think beyond tomorrow. Once humans could reliably think beyond tomorrow, innovation began accelerating. By around 50,000 years ago, the transformation was impossible to miss. By then, people were no longer thinking only about surviving the next encounter. They were planning weeks, even months into the future. They crafted bone needles to sew fitted clothing, twisted plant fibers into rope, built traps that continued working while they slept, and organized hunts that required dozens of people to play different roles. None of these innovations depended on raw strength. Success now depended on imagination, cooperation, and the ability to coordinate around a shared goal. That coordination extended beyond hunting herbivores. Archaeological evidence shows that humans increasingly confronted the very predators that had once dominated them. Cave lions, cave bears, and other apex carnivores appear in sites where their bones bear clear signs of human activity. Some were hunted for their pelts or meat, while others may have been killed simply because they posed a threat. The relationship had fundamentally changed. For the first time in millions of years, predators were no longer the only side shaping the rules of survival. Predators that once viewed humans as vulnerable prey now had to consider the possibility that the prey could fight back and win. As human communities expanded, they also began reshaping the environments around them. Fire was used to clear vegetation, creating open areas where approaching animals could be seen from a distance. Camps were established in strategically chosen locations, and familiar territories became increasingly secure through constant use. Ecologists describe nature as a landscape of fear, where every species adjusts its behavior according to the risks around it. Over thousands of generations, humans gradually reversed that equation. Instead of adapting to landscapes ruled by predators, predators started adapting to landscapes increasingly shaped by humans. Without ever becoming the biggest, fastest, or strongest animal on Earth, our ancestors accomplished something no other species had managed. They combined intelligence, communication, technology, and cooperation into a survival strategy that evolved faster than claws could sharpen or teeth could grow. Humanity had spent hundreds of thousands of years slowly stacking one advantage on top of another. None of them was enough on its own, but together, they changed everything. By this point, the transformation was complete. The species that had once struggled simply to stay alive was now reshaping entire ecosystems, and that journey offers one final lesson. Looking back across that journey, one thing becomes clear. The story of how ancient humans survived isn't really a story about becoming physically superior. In many ways, we never did. Compared with most large predators, we're still slow. We still lack claws, fangs, armor, and the explosive strength that dominates so much of the animal kingdom. Drop an unarmed human into the wilderness today, and the laws of nature haven't suddenly changed in our favor. The real difference lay in how our species solved problems. Every breakthrough we've explored, from cooperation to fire, language, and tools, followed the same pattern. Rather than evolving sharper teeth, we learned to make sharper tools. We built shelter. We sewed clothing. Most importantly, instead of relying on instinct alone, we began accumulating knowledge, passing it from one generation to the next, improving it a little each time. Every lesson survived its teacher. Every discovery became the starting point for the next one. Evolution had always worked through biology, but humans added something entirely new: culture. That ability transformed us more profoundly than any physical adaptation ever could. Within a relatively short span of evolutionary time, the species that had once slept nervously in trees and avoided watering holes after dark spread into deserts, rainforests, frozen tundra, and remote islands. We crossed mountain ranges, survived ice ages, and eventually reached every continent except Antarctica long before modern technology existed. No other large animal has ever adapted to such a wide variety of environments so quickly. Even today, traces of that ancient struggle remain within us. Our tendency to cooperate during crises, our instinct to teach children, our fascination with stories, and our remarkable capacity to invent solutions under pressure all have roots that stretch back to a time when a single good idea could mean the difference between survival and extinction. In the end, the lesson is surprisingly simple. Our ancestors didn't conquer the natural world because they were the strongest creatures in it. They succeeded because they learned faster, adapted faster, and cooperated better than any other species. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon was never the spear, the fire, or even language itself. It was the extraordinary ability to turn individual experience into shared knowledge. Generation after generation, that knowledge continued to grow until a vulnerable primate became the most influential species the Earth has ever known.